This exchange between Senator Elissa Slotkin and Secretary Hegseth is one of those moments that forces the country to confront one of its most uncomfortable questions. What is the military allowed to do on American soil, and who gets to decide that? Slotkin isn't simply sparring politically here. She's pulling on a thread that goes straight into the Constitution, the separation of powers, and the norms we rely on to keep the military out of domestic politics.
Senator Slotkin.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Secretary, I said in your hearing, when you had your confirmation hearing, that my biggest concern with you at the helm was the potential use of the military in ways that contradict the Constitution or that taint what I hope we all want, which is an apolitical military. And when I asked you about whether you would accept an order that was actually given to your predecessor, Secretary Esper, Trump's SecDef, to deploy active duty troops against unarmed protesters and to, in Secretary Esper's words, shoot at them, shoot at their legs, you said this was all theoretical. Here we are, a few months later, you've deployed 4,700 troops to Los Angeles and against the wishes of the governor. And my colleague across the aisle was right. It is the first time since 1965 that we have deployed Guard troops without the permission of the governor. In all the instances he laid out, the president had sent in the military to protect protesters, not against the protesters. So you may dismiss it, but I feel like this is a fundamental issue of American democracy. If you love your country and you want an apolitical military, then it should be the last resort, not the first resort in our country to use them. So to get to the non-theoretical, have you authorized the uniformed military to detain or arrest protesters in Los Angeles?
Senator, I would just start by saying you're not a protester if you're throwing concrete
100%.
at law
Arrest those
enforcement
people.
officers.
Throw them in the jail. 100%. But what you're doing is something different. Everyone knows this is a political decision, right? So we don't trust that you're using the best interests of the military, certainly, and of democracy on top of that. So have you given the order? That's all I want to know. It's not theoretical. For the U.S. military, not law enforcement. They can arrest all day long. That's their job. Do they have the ability, the uniformed military, to arrest and detain protesters currently today? It's a yes or no thing, authority.
It's sort of amusing the extent to which the speculation is out there. These troops are given very clear orders.
Then what is the order? Then list it out for us. Be a man, list it out. Did you authorize them to detain or arrest? That is a fundamental issue of democracy. I'm not trying to be a snot here. I'm just trying to get the actual, did you authorize them to do that?
All of these orders and what they're sent there to do are public. They are there
so say it. So say it. Yes or no?
I'd like to.
Please, yes or no?
As I've said time and time again through interruption, they're there to protect law enforcement,
do they have
ICE
the ability
officers
to arrest?
who are trying to do their job, deporting illegals who were allowed in by the previous administration.
So they cannot arrest and detain citizens of the United States, the uniformed military.
As we've stated, if necessary, in their own self-defense, they could temporarily detain and hand over to ICE. But there's no arresting going on. And you know this better than you're trying to play political games. There's no arresting of U.S. personnel.
Of the U.S. military against members of the protest. Have you authorized U.S. military cyber tools to investigate people participating in these protests? Yes or no?
Certainly in no way that I'd be aware of.
Okay, that's good. I love that answer. That's great. Have you given the order to be able to shoot at unarmed protesters in any way? I'm just asking the question. Don't laugh. Like the whole country. And by the way, my colleagues across the aisle.
What is that based on? What evidence would you have that an order like that has ever been given?
Giving that order to your predecessor, to a Republican Secretary of Defense, who I give a lot of credit to because he didn't accept the order. He had more guts and balls than you because he said, I'm not going to send in the uniformed military to do something that I know in my gut isn't right. He was asked to shoot at their legs. He wrote that in his book. That's not hearsay. So your poo-pooing of this, it just shows you don't understand who we are as a country, who we are. And all of my colleagues across the aisle, especially the ones that served, should want an apolitical military and not want citizens to be scared of their own military. I love the military. I served alongside my whole life, so I'm worried about you tainting it. Have you given the order? Have you given the order that they can use lethal force against honor? I want the answer to be no. Please tell me it's no. Have you given the order?
Senator, I'd be careful what you read in books and believing it, except for the Bible.
Oh my God. So your former predecessor, I guess that's not enough for you. Okay, on Iran. I don't think there's a debate. There's like a cat fight going on in your own party about whether to go after Iran. Have you commissioned any day after planning? So any force protection, any use of ground troops in Iran, any cost assessments? Because I don't think we doubt what we can do as a country in the attack. It's the day after with Iraq and Afghanistan that so many of us have learned to be so deeply concerned about. Have you authorized day after planning?
As I've said, we have plans for everything, Senator.
Okay.
And I would also reiterate how we began, that there will be a classified portion of this 15 minutes after we adjourn.
To understand the weight of this hearing, you have to know Slotkin's background. She's a former CIA officer and Pentagon official. She has spent her life around military systems, command structures, and classified operations. When she raises concerns about using the military against civilians, it's not a hypothetical fear. She understands how thin the line is between maintaining order and crossing into the realm of authoritarian power. That's why she keeps coming back to the idea of an apolitical military. In the United States, the armed forces are not tools of domestic political enforcement. That's not just tradition, it's constitutional design. Her reference to former Defense Secretary Mark Esper is crucial. Esper wrote in his book that President Trump asked about using active duty troops to shoot protesters in the legs. Esper refused. Slotkin cites this because it shows precedent. These kinds of orders are not imaginary. They were proposed before, and the only reason they did not happen is because a Secretary of Defense said no. That's why she pushes Hegseth so hard. She's trying to determine whether he has the same red line, the same commitment to constitutional limits, or whether he's willing to bend to political pressure. The other major point she highlights is the deployment of nearly 5,000 troops to Los Angeles without the governor's consent. Historically, the National Guard is controlled by governors, unless the president federalizes them, and even then, using them against civilians requires extremely narrow criteria. Slotkin is warning that this deployment broke with precedent. Since 1965, that level of federal override hadn't happened. That matters because once a norm breaks, it rarely repairs itself. The precedent becomes the permission slip. When she presses him on whether military personnel have been ordered to arrest or detain protesters, she's not arguing abstract philosophy. The Posse Comitatus Act limits the military's role in domestic law enforcement. If active duty troops begin detaining civilians, even temporarily, the country enters legal and constitutional territory it has not operated in for generations. Hegseth tries to downplay this, but Slotkin won't let it slide. She keeps returning to yes or no questions because ambiguity can be exploited. When laws are vague, power grows in the shadows. Slotkin also raises a lesser understood issue, whether military cyber units are being used to investigate or monitor protesters. Most Americans don't realize that the Pentagon has some of the most sophisticated surveillance and cyber capabilities on Earth. Using those tools domestically could instantly collapse the boundary between civilian rights and military intelligence power. And then there's the most explosive question. Has he given the order for military forces to use lethal force against unarmed protesters? She's not being dramatic. She's referencing an actual historical moment from the previous administration when such an order was discussed. If a Secretary of Defense cannot clearly and unequivocally say no, it means something dangerous. It means the military's restraint depends on personality, not principle. Democracies collapse when constitutional limits become optional. The final portion of the exchange, where she pivots to Iran planning, reveals something important too. Slotkin is reminding him and the public that military leadership must be able to plan for conflict soberly, not politically. The arguments inside the administration over whether to attack Iran are, in her words, a catfight. She wants reassurance that someone is thinking beyond the strike, into the aftermath, something the country failed to do in Iraq and Afghanistan. At its core, this hearing is about trust. Trust in institutions, trust in constitutional boundaries, trust that military leaders will refuse illegal orders. Slotkin is raising the alarm that this trust is being eroded. The point isn't whether the military will be used today, but whether someone in power now believes they could use it tomorrow if they chose to. Democracies don't lose their freedoms all at once. They lose them one blurred line at a time. If you found this breakdown helpful and want more in-depth commentary that connects what you're watching to the bigger picture of law, history, and national security, make sure to subscribe, like, and share. It helps the channel reach more people who want substance, not noise.